This is the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show, presented by hiKin. Hiking plus kinship. That's hiKin. Together we roam. Here's your host, my hubby, and co-founder of hiKin, Brian Special.
Well, we can finally say with near certainty that after being sold out for almost a year, our new day packs should be in stock in November. That will include our 22-liter one-size rim-to-rim pack with our signature front strap pockets, an insulated hydration compartment to keep things cold, and a new pack is coming as well. This is the one y'all been waiting for, the 22-liter Canyon Elite, which will feature the same things that make the rim-to-rim pack what it is, but we've added a hip belt. So many of you asked for it, and we're delivering. It'll come in two sizes, so you can dial in the perfect fit. The rim-to-rim pack and the Canyon Elite coming in November. More details soon, including when we will start taking pre-orders. As always, just got to say, Zena and I are so grateful for your support. You are the reason we do what we do, from this show to our Facebook group to hikin.club and, of course, the Grand Canyon Shade Tracker. It is all made available to you so you can have your best possible hiking experience. Well, our Facebook group is a huge part of what we do here, obviously, and it's a place for questions and opinions and trip reports, and above all, encouragement for those taking on a bucket list adventure that can have so many confusing and intimidating details, as well as the extreme physical challenge. What's fun is seeing the willingness of many of our more experienced folks to help out everyone else. Sometimes it can be hard to ask questions, we get it, but when you're continually seeing the judgment-free answers, it can make a difference. And it's what makes the hiKin Grand Canyon Facebook community truly unique to many of the other groups out there. We also get to know one another in there, and today, a conversation with an ultra-experienced canyon crazy, known to some in the group as Facebook Joe. Joe Adlock is 61 and retired from the air quality consulting business. He's a father of two and a grandfather of five who spends much of his time in Loveland, Colorado, dreaming about and planning his next Grand Canyon adventure. Most recently was a long rim-to-rim-to-rim backpacking trip with another hiker from our group, Caleb Metzger, who you heard in episode 82 of this show. That hike ended just days before the Grand Canyon Lodge burned down, and I'd planned to do a south to north to south R3 of my own during that time and meet up with Caleb and Joe at Cottonwood before continuing on for an overnight at the lodge. Well, I ended up bailing on that plan because I did not want to mess with the heat. But little did I know, that was my last chance to stay at the lodge. This is the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show, powered by hiKin. Hiking plus kinship, that's hiKin. Together, we roam. You know, you guys pop out on July 1st. You finished that adventure that you were on. And it's only, less than 2 weeks later, Grand Canyon Lodge is gone and the North Rim is being decimated. Just what was your reaction to all that when you heard about it, when you saw what was happening, and especially that morning, July 12th, when we woke up and found out that the lodge was gone?
It was devastating. I couldn't believe it. The North Rim the infrastructure is so much smaller than on the South Rim. The fire took everything. Even though some buildings survived, it essentially wiped out the infrastructure until it can be rebuilt. I'm very, very glad that I got to see it one last time. I've been at the North Rim Lodge twice in recent years, meaning since like the 1980s. But I hadn't been on the North Kaibab Trail north of Ribbon Falls since the early 80s, since I started college, actually. So if I hadn't have gone with Caleb, I wouldn't have seen it the way it is, the way, I had remembered it and the way we all remember it. So one, I'm very thankful I was there. Two, I'm very glad that no one lost their life during the fire specifically. It's tragic to hear that just this week, one of the firefighters did die in working on the blaze. It could have been so much worse. In talking to some of the other people in the group, it sounds like the initial evacuation happened not because of Dragon Bravo, but because of the White Sage fire. And had that not happened, they might have really been all of those visitors might have been just caught on that peninsula when the Dragon Bravo erupted. And I mean, as bad as it was, it could have been worse. I'm glad it wasn't worse, but it's still devastating.
It was such a surreal day when I'll never forget hearing the superintendent say on that phone call with residents and employees that, we've lost the lodge. That is just going to be in my memory forever. And all we're left to do now, really, Joe, now that the flames are out and cleanup efforts are underway and soil analysis, burn scar, we're learning a lot about wildfires and the aftermath going through this, but we're just left to speculate what it means for the future of hiking on the North Rim, because we know North Kaibab burned from the trailhead all the way down to the north side of Supai Tunnel.
Yeah.
That's 1.7 miles. That's a long way down. And there's a lot of fear now about how stable that area will be. Flash floods, the spring runoff. We're just kind of left to speculate here. Have you done any of that just to yourself, just making, almost an educated guess? What do you think is going to be the future of North Kaibab?
Yeah, I've no background with which to speak authoritatively. However, I've been on enough trails in Grand Canyon that are in really bad disrepair, things that haven't been maintained in, 100 years, like the New Hants Trail. I think it will be possible to hike down it. It just isn't going to be the super highway that we know it to be. I mean, it was wide. It was nice and flat. It was very challenging, but it was a very well constructed trail. And I'm sure that top mile and a half is not going to be like that for some time, unless they put a lot of effort into making it that way. And what happens with the cliffside that's been burned and has no vegetation to hold it up. I can only speculate that that's going to be really bad with some torrential rains. You're going to get flooding on the trail. You're going to get mud on the trail. You may lose the trail in places. So in terms of a route down into the canyon, it probably doesn't go away. But when will it be a nice, clean trail like we know and love? I don't know. That could be quite a while.
Yeah, we could be talking years, because it's not going to be as simple as just rebuilding a trail. All the support work they're going to have to do, and the mitigation measures they're going to have to take to protect against those landslides, the rains, the floods. I mean, I like your optimism. It's even more optimistic than I can be, just by seeing the pictures and everything and knowing that terrain, especially, even the area that did not burn. It stopped at Supai Tunnel, but that area from Supai Tunnel down to Redwall Bridge is the most troublesome part of the entire North Kaibab Trail for the Park Service, because it is just every year there's washouts there, there's landslides there, just the nature of the terrain in a normal year. Now you've got everything crashing down from above, like you said, with no vegetation to stop it, burned out. I just look at it and I just wonder how the trail is going to survive in any semblance of a trail after at least the spring runoff or the first big monsoon. I don't know. It's just speculation. There's just nothing but concern right now. Then there's concern with what's going to happen even farther down, the parts that didn't burn, even below Redwall Bridge and past Cottonwood and Bright Angel Canyon, because there's the fear now of flash floods coming from the burn scarred areas, not anywhere near North Kaibab Trail, but from, up above, up on the rim, coming down the side drainages, and what's going to stop a huge flash flood between that comes roaring through the box, right?
Right. And there's no escape from the box once you're in it. I mean,
right.
You can't climb the walls, not fast enough to avoid a raging river.
There are very few spots in the box where you would be able to scamper to higher ground. Very few. And it's a 4.5 mile stretch. So you've got to wonder the liability issues of the Park Service of letting people in there, or do they close it down during the monsoony days in the summertime, and they keep it closed in the spring? I don't know. I'm sure these are the questions they're asking themselves behind closed doors right now. It would be great to know, but until then, all we're left with is speculation. But yeah, unprecedented times for the Grand Canyon. I mean, Joe, I was just up there in July in the midst of all this, because I wanted to see what the fire looked like from across the rim. And all I could do for a hike was go down Bright Angel to Havasupai Gardens. That's it. That's the only thing that's available, right? South Kaibab was closed at that time. Everything was closed. Tonto was closed. That was your only option. When in the history of the national park has that happened? I mean, it's just unprecedented times, and I can't wait until they're over. But enough with that. Let's talk about you, Joe. Let's talk about this obsession. Let's talk about these incredible photos that you take and these incredible hikes that you go on. And start by telling me how in the heck you get so obsessed with the Grand Canyon and going below the rim. How'd this all start for you?
Well, it started in Chicago. That's where I was born, in a suburb of Chicago. My dad used to sit at the kitchen table, have his after-dinner cigarette, and say, someday, Joe, when you're a little older and I stop smoking, I'm going to take you to Grand Canyon. I
Really?
didn't know what that meant. I was like 8.
Why did he pick Grand Canyon? Why was that the thing that he would make you
because
aspire?
his brother had taken him there when he was 17 on a road trip from Chicago to LA. They stopped, they hiked to the bottom down South Kaibab and then up Bright Angel as a day hike in the middle of August. And he had one of those hard metal canteens. They had a loaf of bread and some honey. That's all they had. And they started down. By the time they got to Phantom, it was just absolutely miserably hot. So they waited hours. Then they came up Bright Angel, and then one of them stepped on a nail at Bright Angel. And, that set them back a few more hours while they kind of waited. And eventually they came out. And it was about a 24-hour rim to river trip for them.
Wow.
And when he got out, he said, if I ever see a hole in the ground again, it'll be too soon. But then he went back a couple times with a different brother when he got older, with his younger brother. And then he went backpacking once there before he took me. So he had some experience with it. He talked to me about it, and I had no idea what he was describing because I lived in Chicago. I was a little kid. I had never seen it, or I didn't even know what the West looked like. Well, then when I was almost 10, he moved the family. He worked for Motorola. He moved from Chicago to Phoenix, and he spent the rest of his career there. But that next summer, I was 10 and a half, and he and a buddy of his from work, and then me and this buddy's kid, we hiked down to the bottom, down South Kaibab, spent a couple nights at the bottom, then hiked up, spent a day or a night at Indian Gardens, what it was called back then. And then
what year would this have been?
This was 1974.
Okay.
June of 74. And wow, for a kid from Chicago, this was just surreal. I mean, everything about it was great. And being a 10-year-old kid, I had a backpack, but it probably had 6 pounds in it, if that. So I was just prancing down the trail. I was prancing up the trail. I had no problem as a little kid. He carried everything. So he struggled a bit, and he wasn't in great shape at the time. But it was just super exciting. I mean, the river, you get to cross the river. He took me up to Phantom Creek because he had been there or he had heard of it, but we hiked up to Phantom Creek, which is a mile up into the box. We crossed Bright Angel Creek and went up Phantom a ways, and there were these little waterfalls and everything. It was like an amusement park without rides. It was just very exciting and everything. And so when we got out, I thought, well, yeah, I'll do that again. And my dad was obsessed with the West. And now that he lived in Phoenix, he joined a caving club. He, with other people, he learned a lot more about backpacking and hiking and how do you deal with the desert and the heat and, when is it best to go hiking in southern Arizona, that kind of thing. He got to be a very competent backpacker and, pulled me along with him. And we probably either day hiked or backpacked the canyon 2 to 4 times a year when I was growing up. And so it was just instilled in me as a little kid, that is part of life. This is what you do for fun. Grand Canyon was always kind of that special place. That was the gem that we kept returning to. because you can never see it all. There's so much of it. Even if all you do is the corridor, you can still do that 15 times, and every trip is different. The lighting, the weather, your approach to it, what's going on in your mind, and you see new things every time. I mean, I've probably hiked that sort of traditional South Kaibab upright angel 15 to 20 times at this point in my life. And I would do it again in a heartbeat if I had the opportunity, always.
When's the last time you hiked it with your dad?
Well, the last time we hiked it was with my my children in 2005. They were 11 and 13 at the time. He was 65, 67, something like that. He was very excited to do it with his grandkids. But in 2019, he and his two brothers, who had the brother that had originally taken him there in 57, and then the younger brother who had taken, the three of them rode mules to the bottom.
Really?
And I said, well, geez, I can't miss out on this. So they worked it so I could sleep in their cabin. And I hiked down. I didn't really have a desire to ride mules. Frankly, that kind of frightens me a little. I'd rather be on a cliff with my own hands and feet than having a mule hold me. But yeah, I hiked down. I met him. We spent 2 nights down there. My dad, he had cancer at the time, had a lot of chemo, so he couldn't hike a lot, but he was healthy enough to go down on the mules and to go up. He didn't think it was very comfortable, but he was also 80 at the time, so that was a really special time because both he and my 2 uncles, I have a lot of history in the canyon with all 3 of them. And it was just fun to get all of us together, kick back at Phantom. I mean, I actually brought a bunch of fun things down, like they're big beer drinkers. So I brought 2 6-packs of local Colorado beer that they would not have had before. 2 of them were big Scotch drinkers. So I brought a small bottle of Scotch. I brought a bag of chips and some salsa and some other snacks. I mean, I actually had like a 57-pound pack going down because I had so much junk. But I figure, when am I going to have this opportunity again? And, that was it. That was the last hurrah for him and one of my uncles. That was the last time they were able to do it. But, oh my gosh, it was fantastic. No place I love more than Grand Canyon. So I have a trip coming up in October. Caleb is going to join us, which is really fun. I got to meet a bunch of his friends and his son, which was hysterical. I got to meet them and spend 6 days with them doing rim to rim to rim. Now he's going to join my group, which is, a bunch of different people. So he's now the guy that doesn't know anybody. And they called me Facebook Joe because no one knew me. I was just this guy from Facebook. Because that is actually less than a month away. And this is kind of weird. I'm a little strange. I get really amped up over that. Okay. And now that I'm retired, there's no restraint. When I was working, 8 to 10 hours a day, I was thinking about work and blah, blah, blah. I don't have that restraint anymore. So as it gets closer and closer to our October trip, you're probably going to see me posting more and more in your group just because I need an outlet for my excitement. I mean,
it's beautiful.
It's one of the people in my group a couple of years ago. There's a group of us, friends and old coworkers, who have been doing off corridor trails since 2016. Every year we pick a new trail or a new loop and do it. And a couple of years ago, one of the people dubbed me 14-year-old Joe because, well, I'm an old guy and I act like it when I hike uphill, certainly. As soon as I get to camp, drop my pack, doesn't matter how dead I am. I just sort of pop to life and I'm running around with my cell phone, taking pictures of everything, vast scenes, close-ups of plants or bugs, whatever. I really enjoy it. It's just the best part of life.
Well, and it shows in the incredible photos that you take, where most people might just chill out for a while. You get busy with the camera, and I'm glad you do because, if anybody hasn't checked out Joe's photos, man, they are something to see. So, what is it? Is it the off corridor trails that you prefer more? Is it the corridor trails? Is it a mixture of both? What's your preference?
Shade can save your life. That's why we invested in the Grand Canyon Shade Tracker, a completely free tool that lets you see when and where you'll have shade on your hike, no matter the trail, no matter the day, no matter the time. Plan your hike around maximizing your time in the shade and stay safe from the brutal canyon sun. The Grand Canyon Shade Tracker is brought to you free of charge by hiKin Grand Canyon, and you can find it at gcshadetracker.com. That's gcshadetracker.com. Go on, hunt that shade, and have a happier hike.
My dad veered a little off corridor. We did Grandview a couple times, just down to Horseshoe Mesa, and we did Hermit once. Those were his off-corridor hikes. I just thought those were great. I loved them. I especially loved walking along the Tonto. When we went down to Hermit, we walked along the Tonto. It was like a 4-day backpack trip. One of the days we hiked out to Boucher, which is only 4.5 miles of Tonto. And it's similar to the Tonto between South Kaibab and Bright Angel, except that it's farther west. The canyon has a similar look and feel there. You're not talking about way different geology or different layers or anything. But for me, it was the first time I really kind of looked at walking along the Tonto, and I thought, this is amazing, the views you get, and you're going in and out of these canyons to get to your destination. And well, my dad looked at it as, oh my God, we got to go in and out of this canyon. And, I can see where I want to go on the other side of this canyon, but we got to go a mile that way first and then back. He didn't like it. And so, we kind of went back to the corridor. But then in 2016, I kind of got reinvigorated to do this again. I hadn't done a lot of it in a while. Because I lived in Colorado, I had small children for a while, and life gets in the way of fun sometimes. Once I started going with my work colleagues and then added a few friends, we just decided, let's just do something different every time rather than go to the same thing. So we just started, we did Hermit, then we did New Hands, and we kind of branched out from there. It wasn't really so much we were looking for a different challenge. We just wanted to see something new. I mean, if you look at a map of Grand Canyon, it's this big, let's say, and the corridor is just right there. It's really small compared to the entire thing. And if you read something like The Man Who Walked Through Time by Colin Fletcher or A Walk in the Park by Kevin Fedarko, you're following them on a transverse trip through the canyon, not across it, but parallel to the river. And you hear them talk about these things and you kind of wonder, well, wow, that sounds kind of cool. I would like to see that. Or, that thing he's talking about sounds like something I've seen, but it's in a different place. You just kind of wonder what do these other areas look like? And so that's what we did. We just picked a new trail each time. And in fact, this year when we go to Thunder River, Deer Creek, this will be kind of the last of the major trails in the canyon that we will have hiked. There's still a few that we haven't that are named trails, like there's South Canyon on the North Rim, but kind of in the Marble Canyon area. Haven't done that yet. So there's still, a ton that we haven't seen. We've still only seen a very small fraction. It's just been fun to expand our horizons and see new things.
What do you think the biggest difference is between hiking on the corridor trails and hiking off corridor?
The first thing that came to mind was people. You don't see that many people. We did the Royal Arch Loop a number of years ago, and for 6 days, we saw no one except the 2 paramedics that came because we had an accident in the group and had to have a helicopter rescue of one of our members. But other than the paramedics, we saw no one for 6 days. That was pretty incredible.
What happened on the helicopter rescue?
Well, one of our members, we had actually just gone through a pretty tricky climb down off of a dry waterfall, and we were almost down into the creek bed. and the slope was really steep, and it was just covered with these little tiny pieces of gravel that were like billiard balls. And she just took a slip on that while one of her feet was kind of wedged by a rock. I didn't see it happen, but somehow she slipped and it snapped both of the bones in her leg.
Oh,
And yeah, it was pretty horrible. And she and her husband were both used to be search and rescue in Arizona or in Colorado way back in the day. They hadn't done it for a while. So, they kind of knew how to take care of themselves. And we had someone else on the trip who had just finished a wilderness first aid course. And while we all have some level of first aid, she was just excellent. She just took care of everything. And this lady actually walked about a quarter mile down the creek, which we kept trying to tell her, we really think you need to go out, because we didn't know that she had broken anything. We didn't know what had happened for sure. But she gave it a valiant attempt,
wow.
made it about a quarter mile, and then decided, there's just no way I can finish this hike, because we still had 4 days ahead of us. This was on day 2 of a 6-day trip. So,
How'd you end up getting a hold of the authorities? Did you have a Garmin? Did you have a sat phone?
yeah,
What?
we had a Garmin. We didn't use the SOS because we weren't sure how that worked. And you had a really interesting episode with one of the rangers, I don't know, earlier this year,
Lisa
that
Handy.
kind of
Mhm.
explained that. That was amazing to hear, because I really didn't know how it worked. In the future, I would just hit SOS and take prompts from there. We weren't sure how it worked, so we actually contacted a couple of our wives and asked them to contact someone at Park Service, because the way the Garmin works is you can essentially text with it. You can't speak to someone. So we needed someone with a cell phone that we could communicate to. That's kind of what we thought we needed to do. And it actually worked out really well. Probably took 2 hours for the helicopter to get there, and it whisked her off. And she ended up in Flagstaff for the duration of our hike until her husband got out. Unfortunately, they weren't sure the nature of the injury, so they had a lot of extra equipment, so they didn't have room for her
Mm.
husband. And that was kind of rough on him, because he now had 4 days to continue on a backpack trip, knowing his wife is in the hospital. And, we gave him free use of the Garmin to talk to her every day. And they had a lot of texts back and forth. And she did really well. In fact, surprisingly, she didn't want any pain meds. She just enjoyed the helicopter ride out. And, today she's great. She's back hiking, backpacking, doing well. But yeah, it was a scary situation.
I think this is a great point about the difference between hiking on the corridor and hiking off corridor. I think this is an important thing to talk about a little bit, because the thing about the corridor trails, and if you were considering hiking, let's say rim to rim this year, you're not going to be able to do that. You're looking for an alternative. So you're like, oh, maybe I'll go off corridor. Well, I don't think you should consider that unless you have, number one, if you have a lot of Grand Canyon experience. Number two, you're hiking with someone who knows what they're doing and has been off corridor before. You were obviously with a group of very experienced people that were prepared and knew what they were doing. But you mentioned, the most attractive thing of being off corridor, people. There's no people, right? Well, if you're out there by yourself, or if there's two of you out there and you've forgotten something, you don't have first aid training, you didn't bring a communication device, which I'm sure happens every single day, and you get in a situation like that, it can go from being just a broken bone to being something that's going to threaten people's lives, because how's anyone going to know you're out there, right? So being with people that have experience, incredibly important out there. So off corridor, your margin for error is far, far less. If you're on the corridor trails, okay, now you can hike by yourself, right? Because people are never going to be too far away. Help is never going to be too far away. You're not going to be out there alone unless you get lost, which is very hard to do on the corridor trails. So that's why we say that if it's your first time in the canyon, stick to the corridor. If you're going to go off corridor, go with someone who knows what they're doing, or go with a group that is going to be as prepared as your group was. Isn't that how you would look at something like this?
I generally agree with what you said. I think a lot of people that hike rim to rim or rim to river and back, not all, but a lot of them are not necessarily hikers all the time. That isn't sort of one of their hobbies, let's say, but it's a bucket list item, like you've said a million times. People want to do that, okay, I haven't done a lot of hiking, but I can spend a couple of months, get my legs ready. I can go down to the river and back, or I can go across the canyon. Those people definitely, if you don't have general hiking experience, some route finding, almost just kind of common sense that you only get from experience, then you should not be going off corridor unless you want to take a short day hike down Grand View. You can go about a mile to a real pretty saddle. It's not difficult. There's enough people that do that. You're going to be fine. Same with Hermit. You can go a couple miles to a spring. There's a little rest house there. It's really pretty. A lot of people do that as a day hike. It's not overly taxing, but you're right. If this is something you don't do a lot, you don't have a lot of experience, you shouldn't be going. But there are people, let's say people that hike a lot in the Pacific Northwest, or people that hike a lot on the Appalachian Trail, that are just good hikers, strong hikers. They know how to kind of deal with things thrown at them. They may not know the specifics about hiking in the desert, but as long as they do a little bit of research and are careful, avoid August, July, probably June. If they have a good hiking background, I think that they can do these things. I didn't really have a solid background in off corridor, just because I had done a couple of trips with my dad way back in the 80s and 70s. When my buddy and I decided we were going to do this, we were at the South Rim for a conference, an air quality conference with the park in 2015. And Mark and I, and a couple other people who were there, decided, well, we'd been there before, we knew Grand Canyon, but neither of us had been there recently. So we just took one afternoon, we just took a day hike down to 3 Mile House and came out. And as we were coming up, Mark looked at me and he said, we should come back and backpack in the spring. So that's what we did. That was really the start of kind of my rekindling of the obsession. I still was very obsessed with it, but hadn't done it in a while because I lived out of state and blah, blah, blah. But we decided, both of us had done the corridor trails, and we said, well, we have a lot of camping experience, backpacking experience in general. We can do the Hermit, no big deal. So we did. We actually hiked down Hermit, across Tonto, and up Bright Angel. And our experience on the Tonto that time was there were a couple places that were a little nerve-wracking. You have a 500-foot drop off the Tapeats down into a canyon, and there's not a lot between you and the edge of the cliff. There's certainly no big trees like in movies that you can grab onto and save yourself. There's little tiny bushes and cactus with spines. So you don't want to fall. You don't want to have an issue. And it kind of gave us a queasy feeling. Ooh. But year after year, as we started doing other trails, that got to be like, that's nothing. That's just part of it. We've done worse than that now. So part of it is just acclimating yourself to that exposure or route finding. I will say route finding, you really should have route finding experience, but I will also say that we've rarely had to use it much. There are definitely times on almost every trip off corridor where we lose the trail for some reason. Usually we pick it up again within 60 seconds or a couple minutes. Occasionally, like this year, I hiked the Gems, which is out in the kind of west of the village. It's a long stretch of Tonto. It's about 30 miles. I went with a guy who is in your group. Just he and I did it. He had done it once before years ago. I had never done it. That stretch of the Tonto in places, it would just disappear. You'd be walking along and everywhere you look, every space between little bushes looked like it could be the trail. Now, again, at first that was a little disconcerting, like, oh, geez, what do we do here? But it didn't take that long before you kind of got the feel of, okay, what does the trail actually look like and how do you distinguish it? And there were a couple places along there where we lost it for maybe 10, 15 minutes. And my Garmin was actually pretty helpful in one case. We had veered hundreds of feet off and it pulled us back. And once we got back to it, we said, oh, yeah, here it is. But that Tonto Trail is nothing like the Tonto Trail between South Kaibab and Bright Angel. Between South Kaibab and Bright Angel, that's almost corridor-like. Even though it's narrower and so forth, I mean, you almost can't lose it, except maybe at one of the drainages if you know, aren't kind of looking up and down and so forth.
Yeah, boy, when you start saying route finding, that starts to make me just kind of sweat a little bit and get nervous. So that's something that definitely freaks me out a little bit. But, Tonto, I think, is going to be a big part on the corridor of people who are coming up with alternatives to their rim to rims. I mean, I know you feel as badly as I do for so many people that because of the fire have lost the ability to do their bucket list hike, their rim to rim hike that they were getting ready to do here in September and October. We're bummed for everyone, but you probably share the same thought that I do, which is, hey, still come to the canyon, right? There
Oh,
are so
absolutely.
many incredible things that you can do on the South Rim on the corridor trails and cobble together something that's very similar to the distance and elevation change of a rim to rim. So let's talk about that.
Celebrate your Grand Canyon adventures with our unique line of tees, hoodies, and more at hiKin.club. From rim to rim to Victor Vomit, you're sure to find something to satisfy your Grand Canyon obsession. That's at hiKin.club. hiKin. Together we roam.
If you had a choice of a substitute for a rim to rim that someone had planned, what would you encourage them to do on the corridor trails?
So are we talking a one-day rim to rim?
Yeah, let's say 1 day rim to rim. Let's assume they're not going to be able to camp. And we have so many things that we have to worry about right now with closures and everything like that. So let's drill down even a little bit farther than that. Let's say what would you do until November when things start to hopefully open back up again? So what would be the substitute rim to rim for now?
Yeah, if it were me and I hadn't been at the canyon ever before, or maybe I'd been there a couple of times, looked over the rim. If I didn't have a lot of experience, absolutely, I would go down South Kaibab, across Tonto, and up Bright Angel. You get to see virtually the best of those trails. I mean, the views on South Kaibab, when you kind of pop out of that little canyon about a mile in, and all of a sudden you've got views, 180 degrees. It's phenomenal. You cannot imagine that until you're there. I mean, hiking down the red and white switchbacks, I loved that as a kid. You look down on them and you think, my God, I'm going to walk down that. And then you're walking down and all of a sudden the trail just turns color from red to white, just like suddenly. I mean, it's just so cool. And then you pop around that whole red wall formation, you get down to the Tonto. And honestly, even from the Tonto down at tip-off, you're looking across at the North Rim, you're getting a different view than you get from the rim if you were at, say, Yaqui Point. You're seeing all the same things, but from, 3,000 feet lower, probably 3,000 feet lower. So you're just seeing it differently. All of a sudden, all those buttes you were looking down on in the canyon, you're now looking up at them, like Zoroaster and all the others. And the Tonto is really so different than either of the rim to river trails
So
right
different.
there. Relatively easy. It's some up and down with the hills. You go through Burrow Springs, which is kind of just marshy, but you cross the other one. That's really interesting because it's just sort of different. And then some of the views after you've crossed Pipe Creek and are coming around to Havasupai Gardens are just spectacular looking north because you see kind of that rolling top of the Tonto Plateau and those crevices, the canyons between them. It's remarkable. And then, I mean, Havasupai Gardens, that's like a Shangri-La. You've got the big trees, the shade. That's just a great place. You've got water. You just right out of the spigot. You don't have to filter it and spend half an hour filling up your water supply. It's wonderful. And then I know going up the Bright Angel isn't your favorite thing to do, but I love the Bright Angel. Probably a lot of it is nostalgia. I mean, the first time my dad took me up, there's actually a spot between the River Rest House and the Devil's Corkscrew that I always stop at and think of him, because we stopped there back in 1974, hotter than blazes. I'm still the kid running around. He was dying of heat and carrying everything. We stopped in a little tiny nook of shade, and we took our packs off, and he asked me to go wet his hat in the creek, which was like 30 seconds to walk down, but he didn't have the energy. He didn't want to waste the energy. So I ran down, wet his hat in the creek, brought it back to him. And, that memory has stuck with me. There's probably 5 things I actually remember about that trip. And that one is just there because every time I come up Bright Angel, I pass that spot and I smile. That's it. And I love the switchback to the top. I know a lot of people don't. I am much slower now than I was when I was 20 doing those, but I still love them.
It's hard to take as we slow down as we get older, isn't it, Joe?
It is, but whenever I'm finishing a trip, whatever trail you do, the last mile and a half is just god awful. It just is. It's every single trail is steep. Sure, technically some are steeper than others. None of them are flat at the top. So every time I'm coming out, I'm thinking, what are we going to do next year? And there's usually one of the people in my group that I'm hiking with, because I'm always one of the last ones. It's usually Mark and I, because he's a little bit older than I am. And we just say, well, next year, maybe we do the Escalante route. Maybe we do Nankoweap off the North Rim. And we just start talking about it. And suddenly you don't feel the pain. You don't feel that your lungs are kind of hurting. You don't need as many rest stops. It gets the adrenaline going, and you feel a little better, and you're planning for next year, which is kind of exciting.
You've got this figured out, man. I'm right. I'm going to take some notes here. Usually when I get near the top of Bright Angel, I start trying to feed off the energy of the people that are going down, the tourists. You hear a lot of different languages, and I always say you start smelling the cologne and perfume, so you're getting closer to the rim. But I like your plan better. Start thinking about the next one and planning the next one. So that hike that we're talking about goes South Kaibab, 4.5 miles down to the tip-off on South Kaibab. Then you cut across Tonto for another about 4.5 miles to Havasupai Gardens, and then you turn up and go uphill from Havasupai Gardens to the rim. So the cool part about that is it's 4.5 mile chunks, 4.5 miles down South Kaibab to Tonto, 4.5 miles across Tonto to Bright Angel, and then 4.5 miles from Havasupai Gardens to the top. So it's easy to break it up and think of it that way. You lose about 3,200 feet of elevation on the way down to the Tonto Junction at the tip-off, which is 4.5 miles. And then it's just rolling terrain, as Joe mentioned, to Havasupai Gardens. And then you got about a 3,000-foot climb up Bright Angel to the top. So that hike is no joke. If you think that that's some consolation prize in terms of the physical difficulty of it, you got another thing coming, because you're still going to get the same canyon experience of going downhill for so long, getting your legs beat up. Going across Tonto is not the easiest thing in the world, because you're putting more miles on tired legs already. So you're already going to be pretty tired by the time you get to that junction and decide to turn up and head for the uphill. For the first time you're going to be climbing is after 9 miles of hiking. So very difficult hike, very rewarding hike. I love that hike too, Joe. You talk about being out on Tonto. Well, first of all, the South Kaibab views, I'm on record plenty of times of saying they're the best views I've ever seen anywhere in the world. Then you get on Tonto, and there's that totally different experience that I feel like you get on Tonto, where everything is kind of off in the distance around you. It's very open, it feels like. And it feels like the canyon walls in all directions are way off in the distance. And it feels like you're just this little pebble standing in the middle of the Grand Canyon all by yourself. And you don't get that sense on any of the other corridor trails. Do you get that sense too out there?
Yeah, that is a good way to put it. On the trails, you always kind of have a sense that's where I'm going. I'm going up there, or I'm going down there. You kind of know when you're on the Tonto, because it goes in and out of those side canyons. You're not exactly sure where you're going. You're just kind of wandering, and in a way, it almost feels more adventurous. It's fewer people certainly than say the top of Bright Angel, Even today, you can probably hike that section of Tonto and not see anybody if you're lucky.
And just the overwhelming silence out there. If you are able to just stop and not move and just listen, it's like the silence out there is almost deafening. Yeah, that Tonto Loop is definitely one to consider. If you have a hike that's an alternative to rim, that is a very good one. Number one would have to be rim to river. But we're not going to be able to do rim to river until at least November 1st. They say November 1st, they're going to reopen Phantom Ranch and they're going to reopen Bright Angel Campground and they're going to reopen South Kaibab from tip off to the river, which has been closed since July. But it does also say on that notification that they give you that is very tentative. So we don't know if the rim to river is even going to be an option for the rest of this year. So the safest thing to consider is mixing Tonto in. And Joe, I've heard this one. This one kind of blew me away because I don't know if I've never heard of anyone doing this hike. But by necessity, for those that want to get to the river, I'm hearing of a lot of people who are talking about going down South Kaibab and then across Tonto, like you and I have talked about. But then instead of turning up and going up Bright Angel to the rim and being done after 13.6 miles, they're talking about turning right at Tonto when they get to Havasupai Gardens and going all the way down to the river, which is 3.2 miles and another 1,500 feet or so of elevation. Now, having done that hike, the not the one that I just described, but having done the hike many, many times going down South Kaibab and across Tonto, I think it would take an awful lot of mental fortitude to get to Havasupai Gardens and then say, hey, we're going to turn down and go 3.2 more miles down to the river and then have to go all the way back up to where we started from and then continue on to the rim. That's a lot to bite off, but when you add that all up, it's right around 20 miles. And so you're almost at rim to rim distance, which is 21 miles if you go between North Kaibab and South Kaibab. So that really could be just about a full rim to rim experience. Have you ever heard of anybody doing that?
No, I mean, we've never had a situation where that was the only way to get to the river. I mean, you could just go down Bright Angel and come up Bright Angel, but why do that when you can do a loop? I always would prefer a loop because you see new stuff the whole way. So I can see where people would still want to go down South Kaibab for those views, come up Bright Angel. And if they've got the energy and the training, go down and hit the river. I don't do rim to rims in a day, or certainly rim to rims in a day. I don't even do rim to river. I've never done a rim to river in a day just because I'm just not that kind of a day hiker. But if you've prepared for a rim to rim, you should be able to do it. It's similar distance and similar elevation. And I love that section, Devil's Corkscrew and down the canyon. I think that's really pretty. And it's so different than coming down the cliffs off Tip-Off, where, I mean, it's just so different being in that canyon.
Yeah, I think the thing that just to keep in mind, everyone out there, if you are considering doing that, that is a major, major undertaking. I mean, you're going to be right at 20 miles. I think it's 19.9 officially, but then if you go all the way past River Rest House and down to Pipe Creek to the beach down there, you're going to be over 20 miles. You're going to get close to that 21 mile full rim to rim distance. So just know what you're getting yourself into. And if you're going to be thinking about doing something like this in September, early October, when it could still be hot, you've got to keep all those things in mind as well, because South Kaibab and Tonto are completely exposed. There's really nowhere to hide out there. You're going to have no water between the South Kaibab trailhead and Havasupai Gardens. Oh, and by the way, when you get to Havasupai Gardens, you're probably going to have to double back a little bit to go up to the spigot and get water, unless you want to filter in one of the creeks farther below. So that's going to add mileage as well. I'm just telling you, you're gonna be tired when you get done with the first 2/3 of that hike. So turning down and going to the river, yes, you can do it. If you've trained for rim to rim, hey, go for it. Take it on. Let us know how it is, because again, I've never heard of anybody doing this hike before. Definitely doable, but you've got to make heat mitigation your number one priority. You got to make sure that you manage your water properly. It's going to be a long day. It's going to be a long day. Check the shade tracker, all that good stuff. Make sure you're as prepared as possible. But yeah, to your point, if you have trained for rim to rim, That's as close to rim as you're going to get. Going down Bright Angel, doing a round trip on Bright Angel, I'm going to say no to that one. What do you think?
It's
okay.
If that's the only thing I had to do, but
Yeah.
if I had a choice, I think I would still rather go down South Kaibab across Tano and up Bright Angel than down Bright Angel to the river and back. Just because you see more, you cover more territory, see more different things.
Yeah, there is a lot more to see on a loop. And going down Bright Angel and up Bright Angel, I just feel like you're leaving a lot on the table. If you were going to do a round trip and stay on one of the trails, I would do it on South Kaibab as long as it's not an overly hot day. You can go down to Cedar Ridge, 1.5 miles down and 1.5 miles back up, and see the best of the views, because between Uau Point, which is 0.9 of a mile down, and Cedar Ridge, which is 1.5 miles down South Kaibab, those to me are the best views that I've seen ever anywhere in the canyon. They are world-class, unbelievable. If you want to go a little bit farther than that, you can go down to Skeleton Point. That's a 6-mile round trip, 3 miles down the South Kaibab trailhead. That's the first chance that you're going to get to see the Colorado River. So that's cool. That's a good hike. Venturing a little bit farther than that, another 1.5 miles down is Tip-Off, where Tonto is. Then you're going to have to deal with the red and white switchbacks, which Joe talked about on your way back up. That's an extremely challenging day. That's about 9 miles round trip. But again, if you're training for rim-to-rim distances, rim-to-river distances, very, very doable. All this to say, there are a lot of options. If you want to stay up on the rim trail, and that's 13 miles long, you can stay up on the rim trail and have a great canyon experience as well. But there is just so much to do, and Joe, surely agree with me when we say, still come to the canyon. It's still going to be an unforgettable experience.
Absolutely. In fact, I was there last November. I was driving down to Phoenix for a wedding, and I planned it so I would have one full day at the canyon. And I got there and I thought, well, what am I going to do with one day? Because I'm not a rim to rimmer. I'm not a rim to riverer. So I just thought, well, I'll do something. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone doing this. I just did a sample of each of the trails. I started at Tanner and I did about the first mile of each of the trails: Tanner, New Hants, Grandview, South Kaibab, Bright Angel, and Hermit.
What a great idea.
And one of them, I like Hermit, I went a bit further, and South Kaibab, I went a bit further than a mile. But it was kind of fun. Even though I had hiked them all before, it was really cool to see the differences. Because if you're out by Tanner, out by Desert View, the canyon looks fundamentally different. It's much wider. There's a lot of red down there that you don't see in the inner gorge. You see a lot of river just winding through the bottom of the canyon. And then as I progressed westward, that bottom of the canyon narrows down. And once you go past New Hants, you've got the inner gorge, which is just that real narrow channel that the river is in. And it was really fun to just see, to sort of in my head compare all of those 6 trails by looking at all of them in one day. And, I did about 8 miles that day, so it wasn't a ton, but it was a bit of driving between them. But it was kind of relaxing because you do a mile or 2 on a trail and you're not that tired. And then you go on to the next one. You have a little snack while you're driving. But it was just really cool to be able to kind of in real time compare, like, wow, this trail really is. I've always thought this was a rough trail, but dang it, compared to the rest of them, yeah, this thing's horrible. You just seeing them all at once, you just get a different perspective.
Of all the things that you've said so far, Joe, this is the one I'm stealing from you, man. This is a great idea. I love it.
It's a lot of fun.
I love it.
I would do it again.
Yeah.
I would do it again.
And I bet by the end of the day, you were still plenty whooped, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I finished. I mean, it was November, so the sun set early. I actually did South Kaibab, but then because the shuttle, the timing of the shuttle, I went out to do Hermit before Bright Angel because I had to be able to come back by shuttle. I didn't want to walk the rim trail at night. And so when I finally finished Bright Angel, it was fully dark. I mean, fully dark. And I basically went down, how there's the big arc through the tunnel. And then there's another big arc that kind of goes back. I went about a mile down the trail to kind of a little viewpoint, and it was heavily twilight at that point. So it was a long day. I started in Cameron that morning.
Again, I am writing this down because, me being the corridor rat that I am, I'm being forced off the corridor now, just like we all are. So ideas like this are just gold, man. That just sounds like a fun day to give you a little bit of a sampler's platter of just kind of everything in the canyon. I would be remiss if I did not ask, Joe, what does your wife think of all this?
She's been down a few times with me, long, long time ago. She's been on 2 river trips with me. I don't think she gets too nervous when I'm gone because she knows I've been doing it for a long time. I did my first real solo trip in the canyon earlier this year because everyone in my group, we had a permit for 6. Everybody dropped out. So I just thought, well, I'm going anyway. And that was a little strange. I realized I was competent enough to do it, but I didn't like not having anyone to talk to. In fact, I met JD on the way. He and his wife were coming in to Clear Creek the day I was coming out.
JD Yingling from our group?
Yeah. And we each knew we were both going to be there and possibly overlap. We met on the trail and we talked for 15, 20 minutes. And it was like the highlight of my day because I saw another person, It was like, oh, human communication. That was really cool. But I don't know that she likes me to do solo so much, but I always have my Garmin. Even when I hike locally, it's in my backpack. I'm old enough, I'm still very healthy, but the older you get, things can happen and you're just not as strong, or sometimes as bright as you were when you were younger. So it's good to have that as just a backup. I can reach her, I can reach help. It's just become part of my gear.
Joe, this has been fun, man. So grateful that you took the time to come on and talk to us. I've obviously, been aware of you for a long time in our group, and I hope you'll remain in there helping people with their adventures. It's fun. It's very fulfilling. I know you feel the same way I do. It's very fulfilling to help people have their best possible Grand Canyon experience. So I hope you keep doing that, and thank you for sharing all your experiences today. And I'm sure that we will hike together someday, and I'm even more sure that we'll talk again soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian.
That was Joe Adlock. And hey, if you're in our group and you think there's a question Joe can answer for you, just tag him in there, and I'm certain that you will get a response. That is how our group rolls. The Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show / hiKin Grand Canyon Facebook group. Get in there, get involved in the conversation. We'd love to have you. Well, much of Joe's canyon success comes from hatching a plan and sticking to it, and that just so happens to be what's on Coach Arnie's mind in this week's training tip.
We are hot and heavy into the fall canyon season. So many of you are out there just experiencing just wonderful adventure in the Grand Canyon. So I want to give you a little bit of wisdom here. Stick to your plan. Trust your training. All of you have been going through this for months and months, sometimes years, to get ready for this experience. Now is not the time to make drastic changes in your training, in your nutrition, in your shoes. I mean, I'm talking to all kind of people about, hey, I'm going to start using poles, or I'm going to start doing this, or I'm going to try these new shoes, or maybe I should do these electrolytes. And I'm thinking to myself, no, unless you have time, now is not the time to make major changes, little changes, of course, but not major changes if you don't have more than a couple weeks. You've got to trust your training. Everybody will start to panic right now a little bit. And don't let that undo all the good work you've done. Look back. Look back at all the wonderful things you've done in your training, all the things you've learned about yourself and what your body can do, about your mind and what it can do. Don't fall for the trick of somebody else has a better plan than you. Somebody else has better nutrition than you. Somebody else has this and that better than you. Don't fall for it. It's a myth. You know what's best for you right now. Stick to the plan. No major changes. And let's get through this. And then you're going to learn from it. whatever you learn, we can change. We can make changes to that, and you can be better. All right, guys, this is Coach Arnie. I love you. If you get this before your adventure, I hope it helps. And if it's after your adventure, let's start planning your next one. Love you guys.
Coach Arnie Fonseca Jr., our Canyon coach and exercise physiologist. His contact information is in the show notes. And trust me when I tell you, he wants to hear from you. So even if you want to give him a phone call, he's one of those old school dudes that'll actually answer the phone or call you back. Both kind of lost arts these days in the era of social media and texting. But yep, Arnie's old school. All right, that's it for now. My name is Brian Special, encouraging you, as always, to go hike the canyon. Take that first step. Embrace the journey. And when you get there, whether it's for time goals or taking your time, just hike your own hike and savor every step in the magnificent Grand Canyon. We'll see you next time on the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show, powered by hiKin. Hiking plus kinship, that's hiKin. Join the movement in our hiKin Grand Canyon Facebook group and at hikin.club. That's hikin.club.